Speaking of which, so here we are at the podcast. We still do a podcast, right?
I don't know. I mean, it's been too long. It's hard to tell. We've been
It's been
so inconsistent these days that it's really our listeners have been bearing with us as we've
well.
failed to meet the deadlines that we have just set for ourselves.
To be fair, we did two really. I mean, frankly, on my part, amazing Last of Us episodes that Josh had no part in, and that just took some time, but because my thought process on it was just like it was amazingly detailed.
No, I
So
admired that I admired that you were like, "Hey, let's take the podcast that we're trying to grow and build and let's just cover a topic that I feel like I find interesting that nobody else will. And let's just do it for a combined of 9 hours between two games and two episodes. And we'll be
it wasn't
excited
9 hours; it was more like six. More like
and
six.
we're going to shout out to the 10 people that downloaded that episode. Now I'm just
Yeah,
being
for sure.
facetious.
I
Now
mean,
I'm just being facetious.
we've gotten new subscribers within the last week, so they must appreciate something that I've
You're not wrong.
specifically been doing.
We've been averaging a couple a week. I've been seeing the influx, which is always, again, like, to our listeners, it's always fun and it's always bizarre to do this, to put ourselves out there and realize that, like, even now I am saying things on in a microphone that are going to be documented and placed online for years and years to come. And I got to make sure
Right.
that I'm
Just be glad that somebody doesn't try to cancel you.
no, that's fair. I mean, it's not that it hasn't happened in my own past in micro levels, as we know.
Right.
But the first real thing though is, like, before we kind of get into our fun bullshit boulevard here, I do have to kind of make a little mea culpa, and I told Ian that I'm going to do this. So it's kind of funny. You'll see this mic that's right here, like, because we're doing this video thing, which we might release the video, who knows? But for those of you that are listening, you will not hear
Sure.
this.
Why not?
You will not visually see this, but the microphone in front of me. What I didn't do is I did not realize that the mic was not properly channeled into the recording program that I used. And so it was picking up just basically from my computer speakers. So for the recent episode of The Last of Us Part 2, Ian is going to sound fantastic. Me, on the other hand, myself, I'm going to sound
Anyway.
a little quiet, a little hollow. I think you hear trains in the background. And mainly that is because that I did not do my due diligence and make sure that my mic was properly plugged in. So that is my bad on that. And again, I don't think, for those of you that have not listened to it yet and is listening to this, it does not pull from the content or the what we're talking about. You can still hear me. I'm still understandable. It's just not the quality that I, want myself to be at, if that makes sense.
For sure. If anything, Josh, I think it adds to the atmosphere, the overall atmosphere of our apocalyptic situation that we find ourselves in. And speaking of pandemics and all things strange in the world, so, partly one of the reasons why we're doing this little housekeeping in the beginning, can you call it a housekeeping? I think we can. Is we wanted to sort of lay out, a little bit of the future of the podcast, because as you'll notice, this episode is definitely late as far as our normal recording schedule goes. And that's for a few reasons. So the first thing here is that I wanted to take a step back, not from the podcast, but from just our release schedule, largely because of how busy our lives seem to be, and continually, just becoming more busy. So Josh has alluded to before on the podcast, is like he's doing a graduate program in a master's unit. I actually had a question for you. So you're studying. You're going to be a counselor, but are you studying, are you in psychology courses, or are you specifically counseling courses? Is there a difference there?
Right. And that's actually the point of contention in the counseling profession, because the counseling profession is relatively new in, the overall arcing profession of psychology, whether that be, therapist or you have different aspects too, because you have psychologists, you have social workers, you have career counselors, you have school counselors, you have developers. You have all these different things that incorporate, and career counseling is obviously one that most people know with, but also school counseling is where the birth of the counseling profession happened. So clinical mental health counseling, where I'm getting my master's in, it's the bridge between the two. The best way to describe it is what I'm learning is that it's this idea of, for so long, medicine has been viewed as you have an illness and I'm going to tell you what your symptoms are, then you're going to get like something and you're going to be better. It's I am curing an illness. When mental health counseling came into play, it's acknowledging that the spectrum of illness on one side and the continuum of wellness being on the other side is the belief that you can achieve wellness or you can be better without sickness. So the counseling profession and mental health arrived from this need, this human need to fill this gap of how can we better ourselves outside the normal mind frame of what it means to be ill. So those people that are not necessarily sick, or those people that are absent of disease, like absent of disease is not just considered healthy. Healthy is an overall spectrum of well-being, whether that be spirit, body, and mind. So that
Sure.
building on the overall wellness is where this comes into play. So, and as you've learned, it's creating this professional identity where there are credentials and education, and there's a lot of like clinical, the traditional mental health stuff that isn't overlaid that we need to know, but it expands beyond that and helping the individual achieve the maximum capacity of their potential, outside of traditional lack of disease.
Right. So
See,
that
I'm
sounded
learning
like a
so
lot of
much.
fluff. But essentially from what I can gather, you're studying psychology, learning to be a counselor, which is essentially talk therapy. Um, but you're not going to be a psychiatrist, right? So you can't prescribe drugs or anything like that.
No, I can't prescribe drugs, but even so, like with a therapist, you don't. I might be able to diagnose in a certain extent. You might be able to help people. You're right. I mean, it is a lot of vocational style work, as far as talk therapy goes. That's not 100% of what it is, but it's a big aspect of it depending on the specialization that you move towards. But, realistically speaking, it's going to be with, trying to help people, and I know that's difficult for you, Ian, because like you help nobody but yourself. So it's hard for you to understand
This is true. This is true.
expanding beyond that
I
of your
only
own
I
wants
only
and needs.
The other reason why I'm raising a child to be a wonderful human being is so he can take care of me when I'm older. So with that in mind, you were, obviously you're becoming very busy with that sort of thing. I'm busy, working a lot, trying to take care of a kid. I'm trying to sit down and outline a book. That's been increasingly challenging with my busy life, but it's still something that I'm working for. So, long story short, the reason why we are sort of slacking in our release schedule is because of all those things going on in our lives. The other thing here is Josh had this idea about slimming down the NBS News episodes that we do, which is I was initially hesitant on, but eventually sort of came around to the idea of sort of working them into a broader format here. And so I think we came up with a pretty good solution. So when we started working in the NBS News episodes into our weekly release schedule, it ended up being we'd have NBS News every other week, and then our regular episodes those off weeks, right? And I think with that in mind, we came to the conclusion that we would do our regular episodes bi-monthly. So is what that means is that twice a month you're going to be getting our regularly scheduled programming of main idea topics, where it could vary from anywhere between The Last of Us or something more political, anywhere in between, right? So those are topics, I
That's where
think
you
we
went out there.
have
You're
a
like, from video games to straight nihilism, doesn't matter. We're
right.
gonna
Very
and
true.
everything in between, like we'll send your way. So like
Yeah.
that's still
Yeah,
like
I mean,
covering main topics where
right.
where we
I mean,
where we dive deep into particular ideas.
right. Like Josh wanted, we want to do a Halloween special episode coming up here soon. So you look forward to that. We're also going to be covering the election in our main episodes. So our nitty gritty is something that is definitely going to be still part of our main episodes. However, we still want to talk about current events and trying to keep everybody updated with what's going on, as well as do something very special for our Patreons. And so we had this idea. I can't remember who came up with it, but it was something like we still want to do these bullshit boulevards because they're fun and they're off the cuff, but we still want to talk about the news. And so is what we're going to be doing tonight, and I guess we'll just say this now, is that this bullshit boulevard is going to be the last public bullshit boulevard, and every other subsequent BS boulevard is going to be for patrons only. And so is what we're going to be doing for our patrons. We're going to be doing a special dispatch, episode once a month, where we do a bullshit boulevard where we, talk off the cuff. We talk about things going on in the news, and just so everybody has a more personal connection with us, and it's that much more incentive to become a patron, because it's pretty cheap and you can support us for what we're doing because we're amazing. Anyway, so I guess with that in mind, Josh, I don't know if you had any more preamble, but there's some really interesting things going on in the week, and I mean this whole month and frankly this whole year that we could be talking about.
Yeah, you're not wrong. There's all kinds of different things that we could probably discuss and move forward. I mean, I will be honest though, if we're gonna make a copy here for this special, I think it's because I don't know, I'm not sure, maybe it's the day that it was that I had something else going on, but like I did not catch. So maybe Ian, you can probably start with this because I know we wanted to mention it briefly because it happened. Now I already voted. So for me, I guess it wasn't as conducive because like my ballot has already been filled out and sent in. But the last presidential debates just happened not too long ago.
Right.
And the only thing I'll say about but the only thing I'll say about that is like I did not get a chance to like catch up on those debates, which it's on obviously it's on my docket to do. But the thing that I found the most amusing is that a friend of mine had posted a picture of the soundboard operator and had just said like, this is the craziest son of a bitch in the United States at this given moment. And I thought that was pretty funny and pretty accurate, for the second round of debates to have the, because I guess now, according to the debate style, like they're going to start muting, some exchanges depending on who's supposed to be speaking.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Let me just say. So I watched the debate in full. I was actually not planning on watching it. Like it was funny. My wife and I, we were out shopping and then picking up the kid that day, and then we come home, and we were like, oh, the debate's tonight. It's like, oh fuck, dude, I don't want to watch that. It's just a bunch of nonsense. We know it was bad last time. Like, what reason should we be watching it? Tonight, and then we get home and it's on the TV. About to start. It's like, fuck. Okay, well, we're watching it. And, another thing too, I'll say, you just like gave your, one of your virtual signals about you voting because you're special. And I haven't voted yet. And frankly, my ballot is just sitting there. I don't know. Again, I don't know if I'll vote. I don't know if that makes me a bad person. Probably.
I don't think it's no. It does make you a bad person because first of all, you're an asshole and you assume that I say that signaling. I say that in the sense of like, it's done. So therefore it's like the debates are designed, to sway, apparently like undecided voters.
Right.
And we've had a podcast episode about this and we can probably still debate about how you're an idiot.
Well, here's the thing,
but
Josh.
we can.
Yeah. Were you ever undecided though? Like where you were like, you know what? Trump has really got me thinking this election season. Maybe I should be voting for Trump. You know what? I'll watch the debate.
Look, you might speak vindictively there, but like I am sympathetic to understanding that there might be a lot of, because here's the deal. Like
1,000
when you look
people?
at so this is a problem, and this is one of the things that I wanted to bring up with you and flesh out in this bullshit boulevard because we can riff here. And it's this concept of like we can no longer kind of critique aspects of ourselves or the party that we believe in without it being a negative connotation or a connection to something that we don't. So like there's certain people, like for example, in real life, I was critiquing aspects of the left. Mm-hmm. And somebody said to me, I cannot believe that you're conservative. And I went, what?
Somebody said that to you?
Yeah. And
that's
I was
amazing.
Like, no.
That's amazing.
And I went, no. I went, no. I was like, no. I'm actually on the left. And like, oh, sorry. You were just like critiquing it. And I'm like, this is where I'm blown away at the fact that it's like, I cannot even have criticisms of my own ideology to grow and prosper without people just assuming that I therefore believe the opposite. And so that's why I'm convinced that this idea of undecided voters, there would be people out there that may not like Trump, but they might see like extreme examples of one side or the other. And just because of the way that like our culture says, well, if you have a problem, like for example, if I can see an article that talks about extreme left or whatever you want to call that, and you don't like that thing, and then they say, oh, well, that must mean you're on the right, people might believe that, oh, maybe I'm on the right. If they don't know any better, I guess I'm saying that I feel like it's harder to differentiate where you are because of the cultural expectations of what you should be if you see something you don't like. Does that make sense? Do you see the connection I'm making
Oh
out
no,
here?
yeah, no, it absolutely does. I mean, frankly, I mean, it's like okay, so my parents are pretty conservative, and they were watching the debate too, and they're like they voted for my stepdad, he voted for Trump in 2016, but he was just like this shit is a joke, like he's a joke, and then at the same time, they would look at Biden and they were like, God, he's ridiculous, and they're like, so they're clearly in a awkward position is for being conservatives and not in favor of Trump, right? I think most conservatives, especially in rural America, are pretty gung ho about Trump. But, on that same note, though, Josh, you were talking about, the ability to critique something and yet being called out for being on the opposite side. I mean, Josh, like, you're no stranger to me talking about this, but like I could critique, the Black Lives Matter movement and be called, racist. And it's like, no, 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 no. No, no. I don't want anything bad to continue to happen or any type of prejudice or racism to be towards black people. I just think that the movement itself is slightly ill-founded and it may at least wrong in a certain ways. That doesn't mean I am just racist or want like or the same thing with like the defunding the police thing. Like there was just so much. I guess the point that I want to make here is that there was no room for nuance. And when I could sit there and critique Biden and be called a Trump supporter. I mean, just today, no, so I'm sorry, not today, but it was yesterday when Amy Coney Barrett was confirmed as the new Supreme Court justice. I had a
Yay,
coworker.
Catholics!
Right,
Yay!
right. I
Am I
had
being insensitive there?
right.
Like I'm being a little bit
just
insensitive
just
there.
slightly, but it's all right. You're learning from me pretty quickly. So I had a coworker
Fair enough.
who it was just like, dude, like we're gonna have like the worst next 40 years in America's history. I'm like, what are you talking about? It's like, well, Amy Coney Barrett, like she's just gonna reverse Roe v. Wade. I'm like, well, okay, first of all, there are other justices. They all have to vote amongst themselves, and you can't, you have to actually bring a measure to the Supreme Court. It has to go through other courts first until it gets to the Supreme Court. And even just talking about the minutia of the Supreme Court, it's like, well, like you clearly aren't on the side of the Democrats. I'm like, well, no. But
Yeah, but like at the same time though, there are certain stipulations and rulings that they can choose to uphold or take that like
and
go beyond that of what like it brought over the
you're
court. So like
absolutely
look,
right.
I mean, so yeah, so what I'm saying is like I'm not disagreeing that like there is room for caution or there's room for like potential like I'm not sure exactly, what Amy Coney Barrett means for the Supreme Court. And for me, though, it's like, again, and it's all about like bad faith, where it's like, I don't give a fuck what you think the Democrats would do or would not do. Like, for me, it's bad faith to have the Republicans be so gung ho about not letting Obama pick a Supreme Court justice with 10 months of the election and for them to fucking slide one through a couple weeks beforehand. That's fucking shady. And that's messed up, and like, and again, it
okay,
does not,
so
like you might say this, like, I'm not, again, I'm just saying that like from that party's perspective, you cannot define yourself by that law or by that rule and then continue it just for me it's
well,
completely bad faith.
let me Well, okay, so I agree, but let me play devil's advocate for a moment. So I was thinking about this very statement that you're bringing up here a little bit earlier today about the Republicans specifically in pushing through Amy Coney Barrett into the Supreme Court. Frankly, I think that in relating this back to our sort of our anniversary episode that we do every few years, or every year rather, is our problem, our flaws in American democracy. I think this actually is a key factor in one of the flaws here, is that the game of politics itself sort of it allows this sort of thing to happen. And the Republicans, for example, are playing the game of politics, I think, sometimes better than the Democrats, and frankly, bait the Democrats into acting in strange ways. And the Republicans, with not letting, I'm sorry, who was Obama's pick? Who was Obama's nomination? What was his Eric Garland,
Oh
right?
God,
No,
Eric Garland. I think
Merrick,
no,
with
Marin
an M.
Garland. Yeah, yeah.
M for master. Um, I don't know why I went to that word. Sorry, I'm racist.
Yeah, you did, because I know that because the article you sent me that had a problem with the master bedroom term. That's what you did. You fucking, I know exactly what you did. What you did.
You see what
I
I
should
did
probably
there?
cover
You
that.
see what I did there? Anyway,
Yeah,
yeah. So when they stopped Obama from, or from the Senate for confirming Merrick Garland, they were playing the game of politics really well. And I think the thing is why the Republican Party is so much different than it has been in the last 20, 30 years, is because they are absolutely trolling America, and they're playing the populist political game, and frankly they are just ahead of the curve. I'm not saying it's good. I think it's bad for American politics, but they are playing that political game, and I think that the Democrats are just not very good at it. And I don't, I want your take on it, because you're much more attuned to the Democratic leanings. And so, do you think that the Democrats in this election, they definitely pushed the impeachment pretty hard last year. So I think that in that regard, like, they were trying to play politics pretty well. But
sure. And I'm not discrediting that. Okay. I guess I see what the question that you're asking is. The thing is that frustrates me. I guess what really kind of brings to the forefront is, I just, like, for me, on average, I'm not saying every conservative or Republican is this way, but they're just a bunch of hypocrites in my opinion, because those that no specifically like Trumpism and the Trump Republicans,
uh-huh.
because they are all about, oh no, like they got to drain the swamp. Like we're being fucked over by politicians. It's like they don't give a shit. They don't care about us. Like we're not following traditional politics, and they see Democrats as like trying to, play the game of politics, but still play the game in a way that is trying to like promote positive values. And they're like, no, you're wrong, you're not doing this. But they're not seeing that same exact manipulation tactics within the Republican Party. Like they can support Trump, but they're not seeing that Trump is being supported by the same people that are involved in the same game that these people tend to hate, or the reason they're voting for Trump in the first place. And so for me, their rampant progression of a Supreme Court nominee and confirming Amy Coney Barrett literally just solidifies that they're just as dirty, they're just as whatever you want to believe in the game of politics to get their head, to get ahead, to get their power. And the fact that they can just throw that off to the wayside, because they believe in Trump, it's just hypocritical. And that's the one thing that I have with Trump supporters, or one thing I have with most Republicans, that like when it is a inconvenience to them, they throw their values away, or they try to spin it into something that's non-believable. And that is something that's obvious. Now, the only example I'll give with that before I pass along is Costco, a private business, decided to include a mask mandate in their places of business before it was mandated by several states.
Right, right.
And people, mainly conservatives, freaked the fuck out.
Oh yeah, they lost their minds.
And you went, and so like, so what my thing is like, so you're telling me that like a private business making a choice, and you can either choose to follow that or not choose to follow that. That is your liberty. That is their liberty as a private business. The thing that you claim to stand for, because it now goes against what you believe or what you think is right, all of a sudden you have a problem with it, even though it fits the exact context of what you claim to be fighting for. And not only that though, but they call leftists hypocrites, like when they're only hearing extreme sides. So like for me, it's the same concept where I'm voting for Trump because Trump's going to give me what I want. But at the same time, he has to follow the Republican standards. He's got to somewhat be reined in by the
To some
Republican
degree, to some
politicians.
degree.
And To some degree, he might. So here's the thing, because he gives a lot of false promises. Yeah, he might say what he wants to say, but he does nothing. He follows what his delegates or whatever says in
Well,
at
yeah,
the end of the
he'll
day.
say whatever, Yeah.
Right, but at the end of the day, he's going to play the game that the Republicans are playing. And so, like, the fact that people think that he's going to drain the swamp, or that he's not, the fact that, like, he is a cog in the political system, they're just smart enough to use him to ramp. So this is what I see, and maybe I'm wrong, and this is the last thing I'll say, and I want your opinion on this. I see Republicans being smart, and they are selling their souls, quote unquote, to endorse Trump because it gives them the power to do what they just did. The Republicans just randomly progress this like, okay, here we go. Oh, and Supreme Court nominee that's on our side. Boom. Like, they were able to do that under President Trump. And there's still people that are voting for him that support him no matter what, because he's going to fix everything, when they're literally just using him to progress their agenda. And the fact that Trump supporters can't even acknowledge that blows my mind. I mean, am I wrong?
No, I don't think you're wrong, and I think what that comes down to, Josh, excuse me, is a bit of a bandwidth problem, right? I think the Republicans are banking on the American public, especially conservative and America, Americans within the Republican Party, they are banking on the fact that people have such low bandwidth that they're not going to notice the type of sleight of hand that they are performing. And similarly, I think the Democrats are doing something. It's almost similar, like with Biden. He's pushing this narrative of progressivism, and it's like, hey, we got to get rid of Trump, and we are the right way for America. And
See, kind
America,
of, though, because I would okay. I don't mean to push back, but I think that he's not pushing progressivism. He's trying to reestablish, like
the norm.
he's trying to reestablish the classic democratic, like modernism. Like, he's trying to be like, I'm a modern Democrat, like, I'm not progressive.
Well,
And like, even that thing where it's like, well, and I
and
guess the only reason I say that is because Trump is like radical this, radical that. And remember when Biden in the first debate, he was like, no, I am, or the Democratic Party is me.
or he
Like,
said,
and
"I am
he's
the
like,
Democratic Party." Yeah, yeah, sound
right,
very,
right. So he's
very
trying
much
to.
like Palpatine. I get it. But the
No,
thing
I
is,
know that, but he's trying to push the moderate, though. He's trying to push the
I mean,
moderate aspect of it,
yes,
not the progressive.
yes, he is. But he is pushing. I mean, frankly, he is pushing progressive values, and we can get into that a little bit later. But
Fair enough. I see
but
what
the
you're
fact
saying.
of the matter is that Biden has been. Like, this is not me necessarily throwing shade at Biden specifically, but Biden has been a career politician for almost 50 years, and the type of a democratic ideals that he's throwing. I mean, you look at the type of corruption that has just been within politics for half a decade. His type of politics are something that is completely outdated for the sake of the culture, right? One thing that I want to highlight here is that the Republicans seem like they have a stranglehold on how politics are handled in Washington. Right? They are trolling. They're pushing how things are get handled in Congress. Like, I think they have a chokehold on what actually happens in American politics. The Democrats, however, have a bit of a stranglehold on the culture, right? And so, if you think about how corporations and the academy and how Hollywood push certain ideals, it is very democratic or progressive, one might say. And I think the difference between those two opposing forces here makes for a very bad mix, and therefore it allows Americans to only focus on a very few things. And so when there is a nuance here, there's a nuance there, it's hard. Like the examples that we were talking about earlier, you were saying you were critiquing parts of the Democratic position, or whatever you said, and whatever the things I were saying. Like, there's no room for that, right? Like, you are either Trump or Biden, or Trump or whomever, Kamala Harris, for that matter.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
just think it is a
And
bandwidth problem, right? Where we just don't have.
also, I'm actually proud of you for pronouncing her name
Did I
correctly.
say her
Like, good
name
for
right?
you.
Sorry, I'm
You did, yeah,
I'm sorry.
yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not a spitting image of Ben Shapiro. I guess it's the lack of the
Oh, you said
Judas.
Kamala.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't think you said Kamala, so
I
maybe
don't
you
even
didn't do it
remember what I
right.
said.
But no, no, yeah, it's fine. So, no, like, so I guess I get what you're saying here. I think that, like, for me, it's difficult because I just I'm one of those people that stay on the sidelines. I'm not actively responding or I'm listening, and I'm seeing responses. And so the common pattern that I see with all the back and forth, like politically speaking on social media, it's for example, Ben Shapiro has the audacity to leave a BBC like a BBC interview
Mhm.
because he's pissed off that they brought up things he said in the past. But
Sure.
every single thing I've seen of him when he's critiquing Kamala Harris and or Biden, he's bringing up shit that they said in the past. So like I'm just like, how are you okay to get upset and angry when people bring up the shit that you say in the past? But you're able to use
Well,
that to the people that you dislike.
however much of a sleight of hand and jam, poke in the side. I mean, when Trump brought up the fact that Joe Biden's and Obama's administration built the cages for holding immigrant children and families, Biden didn't really have much to say about it, and didn't want to really think about it all that much. So I think it does go both sides. However, I think
Yeah, but at the same time, though, like, look, if you're going to bring up that, then you need to understand the concept of that policy because,
I
like,
know.
when during the Obama administration, okay, those things were developed for actual breaking down of people that were not connected to those children. So, like, there were people that were trying to cross that had kids that weren't theirs that were like trying to pitch that. So there's an interpretation, there was a vetting process of separating children when it was acknowledged or interpreted that they did not belong to the people that they were with. When it came to the revamp or the upping of Trump's policy, it was like, no, just fucking separate the kids. Like it was like not even a question. It was like, no, just pull the kids
Right.
out. So there wasn't
No,
that
I
extra
definitely
level of
think
interpreting. That's the context part. That's
no.
like the
You're
deep
right.
down dive of the
The
reason why. It's a manipulation tactic.
the policies between the Trump administration and the Obama administration are very different. But I do think though that
Okay,
we see
thank you. That's all I was kind of getting at.
you're like, yep, that's it. That's it. That's all I wanted to hear. I do think though there's hypocrisy on both sides. I do think though you are right that the Republicans they have a harder pill to swallow, right? Like it's frankly I I don't think they have the capability of being honest to America on what they want. It seems like the Democrats they have been telling us what they've wanted for a long time, and it's only now that we're realizing that like, oh, like at least people on the left within the culture are realizing that like, oh, we can do something about it, whether it be through Black Lives Matter or Antifa. And I know that those two ideas don't capture the entire view of radical leftism, or at least as far as pushing the type of political motivated idea. But I do think,
Yeah, but that's also using the R word, like radical. It's like that's
well,
just
I
that.
mean,
It's a fear tactic. It's approach. Because like, look, and I guess maybe I'm saying that because I'm just saying that like I'm part of this leftist group that I'm not going to that extreme. I'm not. And again, you and I on this podcast got shade from Antifa
I know,
supporters
yeah,
because
yeah.
we talked. So again, like I can acknowledge that like, and again, this is another example, for those listeners that don't know this, like we were trying to just say that like punching Andy No in the face, like and trying to suppress him by violence is a very fascist thing to do.
Right.
So we were trying to say that that's counterproductive to being anti-fascist, and we got fucking slayed, or we got in a conflict because people like can't believe you'd believe, and we're like, no, 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 like we don't fucking believe in anything Antino has written. I don't support Antino. I don't like what he
We're just
produces,
talking about what
but I
happened.
still
And
but I still, in that one context, would not like punching him in the face or throwing milkshakes, whatever, is not conducive to the point of trying to create a society of bettering values when you're trying to. So again, it's the thing about the extreme left that people critique that this is what I'm saying with you. It's the few examples that get shown, but like the point is that if you want progressivism and you want to create the betterment of everybody else, the violent acts or the suppressions of canceling other people or trying to hurt other people because they don't believe in what you believe in is counterintuitive to the very ideology of what it means to be progressive.
I mean, you're absolutely
And
right
that's
about
what's
that, but I do want to push back a little bit on your your focus on what it means to be radical, or at least calling out people on the left for being radical and how it might be counterintuitive to people on the right. And frankly, there are. I mean, I've known people specifically, who have said, when it comes to the COVID-19 pandemic, it's something that we should fear. And now I definitely am on the side that COVID-19 is a real virus. It's a very hard problem that we have to deal with. We should be wearing masks when we're in close proximities with others indoors, and we need to be careful, with our elderly and with, super spreading events and things like that. However, caution is different than fear. And I think that when average everyday folks who happen to be Democrats or on the left, and they're saying, like, no, like, this is something you need to fear. We can't go outside. We need to restrict life down to the bare minimum. I think that sort of thing is what drives people, frankly, on the conservative right into even more radical extremes. They're like, well, the whole thing is fake. I mean, Josh, you're the one who told me.
no,
Hold
that's
on, let me
okay.
say,
Okay,
let me
that's
let
not
me
what
say
I'm
one
saying.
thing. Let me say one
Okay.
thing.
Sorry, I feel like you say your one thing, and then I'll tell you why I believe you're misinterpreting what I meant.
Okay, well, I'll say then here, and I'll leave it over to you. Is that you had conversations with your friends? You used to live in New York City, and obviously New York City during the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic was hit very hard, and they've recovered pretty amazingly compared to other parts of the country and the rest of the world, and it's now relatively safe, especially within the city of New York City. But your friends, whom you spoke to, were very afraid. They were very cautious, and they were, frankly, from what it sounded like, they took a moral step in a direction of, like, no, you need to do these certain things to protect yourself and others in order to reduce the spread of coronavirus. And because you lived in a different part of the country where the problem was different, you didn't have as many infection rates. It was sort of like that same level of moral outrage didn't translate because of your context, right? And so I think that in the real world, when people on the left specifically, because they take COVID-19 almost too seriously, and again, I'm not trying to diminish the harmfulness of the virus itself. Like, when people take it too seriously, they tend to overlook the actual facts of what's going on with the pandemic. And so, with that in mind, the point that I was trying to make, Josh, is that while you say that, at least what I think you're saying is that while people on the right tend to be hypocritical, they tend to push certain populist ideas into this very far right realm. I think that average everyday Democrats are doing very similar things with certain ideas, especially like the pandemic. So am I wrong in that interpretation of what you were saying, or do you have some pushback there?
Yeah, you're wrong.
I just gave that to you, didn't I? You're just like, oh God, like, this is my chance to call him wrong, to say that it's wrong.
No. Again, you misinterpreted what I was meaning. When you use the term radical, like, what I thought you were doing is what the Republicans like to do is they use the term radical to encompass everything the left believes and the left incorporates. Like, they are connecting radicalism with the entire ideology of progressivism or the left. And I'm trying to say that, like, when you, even me as a left progressive, there are radical leftists that I critique. And that's the point that I'm saying when somebody thought I was conservative. So what I'm saying is that, like, that is a semblance of the rhetoric that's being used by Trump and the Republicans of saying, like, radical this, radical that, left, 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 left. They are making connections that the loudest and the most kind of absurd voices in the left, because each side has this, because I bet you that there are people that might be conservatives that look at what Trump's doing and that look what, like, and they're like, that is not what we represent. That is not what we are. There's got to be moderate voters that are more conservative leaning that are frustrated with the way that their party's being viewed, just like there is on the left side. So the point that I'm trying to make is that when you use the term radical, you are then encompassing the entire left ideology because of a few things that you've seen, and you can use the term radical to make your point. And that's what Pence does, that's what Trump does, that's what fucking Lindsey Graham does. Anybody in Trump's circle who is really wanting his attention is using this term radical to completely deteriorate what the actual purpose of progressive ideology is. And
So
that's to provide the best outcome for each citizen.
So let me ask you this, like, well, okay, well, outcome is an interesting word choice there, but I mean, do you think that the left broadly,
That's the counseling background. That's from studying. It's outcomes
I'm
is a
sure,
huge,
yeah,
garbage
God
term.
forbid
So
opportunity, but do you think that the left does does not do something similar, at least broadly so? I mean, because when I see something like, okay, again, this is quote unquote, I'm using air quotes here, radical example. But do you think somebody like Ibram X. Kendi, when he says that you are either a racist or an anti-racist, and people who are like, well, I'm just not racist, and those people are then deemed racist because they're not anti-racist? Again, I'm sorry for the minutia and the strange, cultural rabbit hole here that I'm diving into, but that to me seems like those people in those circles who, again, as I mentioned before, have a bit of a stranglehold on the culture rather than the actual political game in Washington, is that the left views people on the right as immoral and who are morally backwards. I mean, to me, that seems like it's the same steps that you are accusing people on the right for taking. Like, I guess I just want some clarification on whether you think it goes both ways here. At least more in a
of course, no, of course, it goes both ways to a certain extent. But that's not. But again, I feel like that's a comparison because I'm critiquing the right. Therefore, I have to have an opinion on the left. Like
oh,
it's
don't
like
you?
that's not the purpose. Well, no, I'm not saying that I do or that I don't, but I'm saying that my problems with the right does not mean that I have to justify my position on the left. Does that make sense? Like you were telling me, like if I
Oh, for
critique what
sure.
the
Yeah, I
what the
get that.
right is
I get that.
doing, yeah. So this is the point that I'm trying to make here. When it comes to the radicalism that you're claiming, I'm just saying that like that idea of like you're either this or that. Like, do you
Mm.
think that one person's voice represents the entire left? Like, because I feel like that's how you're interpreting it, and that's how you're pitching it to
Yeah,
me,
you know,
and vice versa. Because
I'll get. I gotta be honest, Josh. I'm not gonna say that like all of leftist ideology, progressivism, whatever, represent. All of it is represented by one specific set of ideas and one specific person spearheading the whole thing. I'm not gonna say that because I know that's not true. However, I do think though, this is the sort of through line of my point here is that Republicans have a stranglehold on politics in Washington. They seem to dictate how moves are made in Congress and various other places in our legal system. But the Democrats, okay, I shouldn't say the Democrats, but the left as a whole, I feel like does have this sway in our culture. And I think that wherever we look, we are starting to see a larger shift in a certain direction, or at least a certain kind of rhetoric. This it's sort of like, however many weeks ago this was. You remember when all the black squares went out on Instagram, right? It's something like that. It's an event like that where a company like Facebook or Instagram or various other large corporations, they are in large support of movements like Black Lives Matter. And I'm not saying that is right or wrong. I'm just saying like that's just a fact. That's what's happening. But that wasn't happening like 20 years ago. It wasn't happening 15 years ago. Like if there was something major, if there wasn't a major event in our sort of social memory that happened, 15, 20 years ago, you want to see these large corporations in support of them. Now you do,
okay,
right?
let me get. I think what you're trying to say is like by saying that like. See, this is the problem though. I guess I just don't like the terminology of like the left in general over the overall left. Because it's like I guess for me, it's like when you take these examples. So again, okay, let me see if I can't say your point back to you.
Mhm.
You're saying that like big corporations, right? That's free market capitalism. That's like that's making money. That's traditionally considered conservative, like, or follow
Sort of,
conservative
yeah,
values when
yeah.
it comes to like business, lack of government, because a lot of big corporations usually do not like government involvement. They don't like paying taxes. Like there's certain things like less taxes is a completely a Republican and conservative talking point. So when you see these giant companies, these big companies who are now supporting these these leftist ideologies, or what you presume to be leftist ideologies, there is a manipulation, or a threshold or a hold of culture, because these big corporations wouldn't be bending the will or bending their own will to these ideologies if they didn't think that the majority of people believed in it, and they wouldn't make money off of it for
Right,
supporting
yeah.
these
Yeah, I
things.
think the key.
It reminds me like the big joke of like, Toyota, pre COVID, Toyota went, we're Toyota, buy a Toyota. Post COVID, they went, we understand what you're going through. We support you,
Yeah.
buy a Toyota.
Right, yeah. No, I mean, you're not
So like the end of the
you're not
message is,
wrong. I mean, like, it is, sort of the free marketplace, right? Where like, oh, like here's something we can pick up. This is a new emerging market. Like it's pretty cynical, but like, hey, like we can make some money off this shit. I mean, you're not wrong at all. I
well, see, I guess what I'm getting to is like, this is my problem with free market capitalism. Like, if we're going to get into this topic, the reason why I say I guess, okay, the only thing I'll say is like, it's the idea that a free market society will regulate itself because of competition, and it will say, no, this is what's best for the consumer. And I just don't think that that's right. I think what you may not have
was
been
definitely not right.
acknowledging for a different context, how I view this, is that you're trying to acknowledge that it doesn't matter what is better or best for the consumer. Whatever is the most popular belief, or whatever is believed to make the most amount of money, is what somebody's going to back. And that's what they're going to support in hopes of proving to the market that they're worth spending money on.
Hmm.
And this is where you get to this moral gray area of like what's right and what's wrong. And so for you are like judging your moral gray area of like, if like big corporations that are kind of sketchy before are promoting these ideologies, then there's got to be something fishy going on there. Like there's got to be something else going on
Well, I mean,
if
I'm
they're
not.
going
I'm
to
not
support
necessarily.
these.
I'm not necessarily saying that. I'm just saying that like we should be distrustful of where the money is going, regardless, right? Because like it just shows you that these corporations, giant, I mean, like places, companies like Sony and Apple and Facebook, they're all just like, ooh, like let's jump on some more money. Like we should be skeptical of that in
Sure.
general. However, I just think you sort of mentioned that you didn't like the way I was portraying just the sort of language of calling things, leftist or progressive. And I get that. However, I don't know what else I mean, like, what do you do when you're confronted with somebody making an inaccurate assessment of people on the right? Like, I mean, do you ever defend, I'm being rhetorical here, but like, do you ever defend the right or defend people's use of language? Like when you have friends on the left who are like, oh, it's just conservatives or it's just Republicans. It's like, well, like there's probably a little bit of a difference there, in views of thinking,
I do.
so
Absolutely, I do.
I mean, of course you do
And
because
the
you're
biggest one
smarter
I
than
do
that.
is like,
But
no, I do.
I'm just,
No, because the biggest one I do is with you, where people like, for me, the one that I do the most is on my conservative doesn't mean Republican. A Republican doesn't always mean conservative. So like I tell people all the time, I'm like, conservative and Republican are not interchangeable. They're actually like different beliefs that can mold into each other, but it's not always the same. Like you can have theoretically a conservative liberal, like it's possible.
right.
It's in the mind frame, just as if like, because for the mind frame, like liberalism, classic liberalism is follows more conservative ideology. So when it comes to the birth of these terms, you can be smart enough to at least acknowledge that, like, no. When I say progressive, I'm like, you can be a conservative progressive if you think that you can have progressive ideology within less government or within less interference from outside sources. Like these terms have been molded and intermingled. What I am saying is that when you say things like the radical left say this, like it indirectly just incorporates the entire spectrum of what you believe this to be, which is not entirely true. So that's why I tried to make that clear when I say either Trumpism or like I use terms like on average with the Republicans I see, or like with the people that tend to be conservative who support Republican ideology, they tend to do this or this and this. So I guess I'm just trying to be more specific in the breakdown. So like, and I get this, for example, I think I was listening to Joe Rogan had I was just listening to one of, oh God, what is it? He's been around. God, he's popped up on a lot of my stuff. Hopefully I can look him up real quick and do this real fast. So it's
Who,
not
Alex Jones?
like no, not Alex Jones.
Turns out Josh is
okay,
a big
Douglas
Alex Jones
Murray.
supporter. Oh, Douglas Murray. Yeah, yeah,
Douglas Murray.
yeah.
So Douglas Murray's been around all the time. So here's the thing about that conversation that really irritated me. They were critiquing the left, and finally Joe Rogan kind of made a joke that's like, I'm on the left. I believe in a lot of what the left believes in, and I'm glad that he finally said that. But the way that Douglas Murray was talking, he was saying like, oh, well, leftist people, he's like, well, leftist people, they were like doing this and this and this. And he's got that accent. And
hold on. Douglas Murray is from Britain.
Am I being derivative?
A little bit derivative. Douglas Murray is from Britain, so let's just say that that you're not like completely calling this guy out for being a total asshole, like you do to me all the time. But
no. I know that. I mean, and he also has like a little Australian influence. He's even admitted that for spending some time in Australia. Yeah. Like he's got like some of his accent has a little bit.
He's
of
also gay, so he's got that going for him.
But
Douglas Murray,
that's
not Joe Rogan.
The point. But the point is, I know Douglas Murray, but when Douglas Murray was like talking about like some ideas of the left, they said it in such absolutes that this is what the entire left believes, and I'm baffled. I'm like, I'm blown away that they say these things, and so for me, it's like, I don't know. I feel like that's a little disingenuous to just like make these grandiose statements and be like, well, people on the left are doing that. I'm like, yeah, I know what you're talking about because I know like particularly what he was referencing. That's not all of us. You know what I mean? To phrase it like it is, to me, to get your point across, just
I don't know.
So even like left or right,
yeah,
they both do.
I'll come, I'll come in agreement with you here, and maybe we can end on getting close here. But it's just the same thing.
Sure.
Josh, you were talking to me about how like there was an interesting Sam Harris episode as of late, and I started listening to that. I don't know what episode, so sorry, but it was about this guy.
Right. No, you can keep talking
about meritocracy and sort of these myths, involving merit and just desserts and
episode 221. And it's called Success, Failure, and the Common Good.
Right.
And it's a conversation with Michael Sandel. And who is the justice professor at Harvard
He's
University.
a political philosopher. It was a bit hard to listen to, mainly because of the sort of utilitarian ideals being espoused throughout the whole entire episode. But, like with Sam Harris, I love Sam Harris's willingness to really go places that most people are uncomfortable to go to. That was one of my original reasons for jumping on the Sam Harris bandwagon, but frankly, in a similar vein of you being a little bit tired of hearing those arguments coming from somebody like Douglas Murray, at the same time, I get tired of people like Sam Harris continually, one, talking to people that he almost never disagrees with, right? And two, talking about this same shit about basically how he is sick of the way that America is going and the rest of the world is going for not being super rational and not understanding like how science works. I'm like, Sam, most people aren't like this. And you are probably alienating a giant portion of America for sounding super elitist,
You're not wrong. And when you said this to me off mic, when you like said this to me off mic, I was like, shit, like you make good points. Like that makes sense. Like I was completely supportive
I love listening to Sam when he has somebody on like John McWhorter who he talked to, he's writing this book about like the new religion of anti-racism. I love listening to that conversation because he's talking to, again, like this is sort of a bit of a loaded term, but he was talking to a black intellectual who had lived experience, living as a black man for 40, 50 years in New York City. And yet he's talking about the flaws in this sort of anti-racism ideology. And I find that sort of thing fascinating, right? Because you get this other perspective. And yet Sam, almost all the time, he's talking about issues in America, whether it comes to Donald Trump or the pandemic or AI, whenever he's talking about that, or consciousness and psych, meditation and all this bullshit. And I'm just like, dude, like, I used to go to Sam when he was talking with people that he vigorously disagreed with, and it was so interesting because I feel like you could gain something from that, and yet he just wants to be, I don't know, like, hand fed agreements from people, within his sort of elite circles. And I don't know, like, it becomes, you've accused me of being tone deaf before, which I can handle. But when I hear Sam say some of the things that he does, to me, he is very tone deaf to the things that is going on in America. And I don't know how we got on this topic, but I, you know,
This is the
right.
bullshit boulevard, baby. This is the beauty of the bullshit boulevard. You and I are
Exactly.
just riffing. Like, this is like, we're gonna let listeners in. Like, this kind of conversation that Ian and I are having right now, this is what we do off mic. Like, when you
Right.
get Ian and I in a room together with either some whiskey or some cigars or like whatever,
This is the
like, this
thing.
is what Ian and I do.
This is
We
what we
just like
used to do before
go
we
down these
started the
rabbit holes.
podcast, right? We would just get into the same room and just
Correct.
start talking about just insane shit. But anyway,
And just riffing on some
right.
insane shit.
So I just, like, I get sick of just the same bullshit over and over again. And frankly, I feel like I've sort of fallen off of Sam Harris's podcast because I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ. Like, oh, here he is talking about, like, how
It's not,
stupid
okay.
Americans
I'm not trying to
are.
be funny in the middle of your shit, but it kind of sounds like you're like, I'm not trying to be funny here, but it's kind of, I thought I was about to give you shit because I thought you're like, and frankly,
Oh.
like, that's what
Sorry, I
thought
didn't
you
mean to
said.
make a Jew pun. But yeah, anyway, so I just yeah, yeah,
There you
I
went.
I had to call it out, because that's who I am. I say jokes even though they
True.
don't land, even if I don't laugh. So anyway, I don't know where we're going here, but we've been going for about an hour. Um,
Yeah. Let's wrap this up. Let's just say that, like, yeah, this is what we do. We talk, and like for our
right.
main episodes, we obviously like try to find a way to structure ourselves to be able to like stay focused. But these boulevards, like, these are just, again, this will be the last one that we're going to offer, like, to just our general feed.
Right.
And like, we encourage you that if you like us, we want to keep doing this. And of course, like, we're trying to live the world and the life that is realistic to what we live. And that means trying to expand our following and trying to expand more people to like to hear us enough to want to give us just a few dollars. We're literally talking $1 or $2, a month, to the one Patreon that's already doing that. And you'll have access to this ridiculous content, and even can choose an episode for us to do on our main stuff too, if you do higher
That's true.
tiers
You
of
can
our
vote
Patreon.
on it. Yeah, that's
So
true. You can vote.
exactly. So again, like, www.necessarybspod.com. You'll find our Patreon link. You'll find all the way to follow us, how to listen to us. Thank you guys for bearing with us for this, this entire hour that we've riffed. And
Yeah,
as Ian mentioned, we don't even know where we're at anymore. So
no.
we're just going to pitch the podcast and call it a day.
Yeah, this is, what, if this is your first time hearing with us, like, Jesus, thank you for bearing with us. But you know what, before we get out of here, I thought it would be a little special to shout out all of our new subscribers. Josh, I don't know how you feel about this.
Oh,
Yeah,
good.
because I haven't done this in a while.
I'm super stoked about that. Let's do
Okay,
it.
so I want to shout out Madeline Jacobus. I'm sorry. Like, yeah, we just get these emails, and I'm just trying to go off your name here. So Madeline Jacobus, R. Bellinger, J. Paul May, Leanne Hilton. And I'm just gonna say this. This is coming from Hilton Management, as in the Hilton hotels. So someone in the Hilton family has subscribed to us. Thank you.
Which is great, which we're super glad, like, which hopefully you can just have our podcast, as we joked
In the
before,
elevator
just
music. Oh God,
elevator
that'd be
music.
so fantastic.
Like, or if you need, like, or if you need, I'll be able to, like, I'll just be like, welcome to the Hilton Motel. Like, I'll do your advertising. Like, hit
And
me
if
up.
you could send us free towels, that'd be great. So, and then also we've got Jenny Perriam. Thank you for subscribing. Susie Brands, Andy Bradford, 11. Then there's just a phone number for subscribers. I'm not going to read the phone number, although I should. I totally should. Maybe in our Patreon.
No, don't. No, it's fair not to. But at the end of the day, though, like, no, but still, though, it's like we have fun. We joke because it's wild
Right.
for us.
It
Like,
is.
the fact that you guys have all subscribed to the podcast, like went to our, we are really tickled pink, and we appreciate you so much. So for those that have already subscribed, for those future subscribers, like thank
Right.
you, because it really does mean the
And
world
and
to
the
us.
last one here, Kenneth King, for subscribing. And frankly, yeah, as Josh was saying, I'll just reiterate. We're just happy that people like to listen to us, and frankly, I'm tickled black. So anyway, with that being said, we can get out of here. Josh is just shaking his head at me. So anyway, thank you for bearing with us. We'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to the Necessary Bullshit podcast. Bye.
Bye.